How you doing, guys? This is Eric from secretoftheinternet.com. As you guys know, I am a big UFC fan, and for those of you who haven't watched the recent Ronda Rousey pay-per-view, her big return after being gone over a year after losing to Holly Holm, losing her title for the first time, her first professional loss in mixed martial arts, which was a pretty devastating loss by knockout. She came back and lost in even worse fashion against Amanda Nunes, something like a 43-second knockout, finish in the first round. Pretty humiliating for her. So a lot of people are talking about her training, her mindset, and basically is her coach terrible, like her coach Edmond Tarverdyan? Is he a bad coach? Has he been doing the things he needs to do to get her prepared? And I think there's another possibility here. Obviously, that is a possibility. I think there's evidence to support that, which I'll get into in a little bit. But I think there's another possibility, which not as many people have considered, is that she may not be a very coachable person or a coachable fighter. She may not be able to improve as well as one would think in these areas, in these skill sets like her striking and head movement and things like that, as you might expect from someone who's that good at another aspect of mixed martial arts, or just in martial arts in general. And that's a possibility. Maybe Edmond isn't that bad of a coach, but we'll look at both possibilities here. So the one possibility is that he is not a good coach and that she would blossom and do incredibly well under someone else. The evidence for this is comments he made during the first Holly Holm, or not the first, but her first loss, the Holly Holm fight, where she was destroyed in the first round, not quite finished, but completely dominated, was just stumbling all over herself. And when she went back to her corner, he was saying that she did a good job or something like that. He was actually giving her encouraging kind of notes, saying that she was doing well in spite of the fact that she was doing terribly. Then there's evidence of all the fighters that have gone into his camp have started doing poorly, like Travis Brown, who was doing fine in the UFC, actually doing really well before switching camps because he started going with Ronda Rousey. That could be a coincidence. There's a lot of other pro fighters under his tutelage that are not doing well, but they're not really known fighters. So he just doesn't have that many high-end fighters under his tutelage. Probably can't make too much of a, kind of a diagnosis based on that. The one evidence that I would notice was probably Travis Brown is the most notable thing that sticks out because of that. And another thing that people mention is that she's so good at these other aspects of martial arts that it's almost impossible for her to get into this situation under someone who is primarily known as a striking coach and not progress almost at all from her first mixed martial arts fight to her latter fight. If you notice that, you can look at all her 11 or 12 fights or whatever, however many she has, and you notice that she's had almost no progression under throughout those time periods. The only difference is really that she's switched to relying on her strikes more in the opening parts of these fights, but the technique itself hasn't really gotten any better. So then the other aspect is maybe this is just her. There are people out there that you could put them through just as much training and they would be just as bad as a striker from, the whole 8 years or whatever, they wouldn't get better at all. The only reason we would think it's weird with her is because it's someone who is able to get better, and not only better, but elite in these other areas. So if someone who is terrible at striking, if they suck just as bad as everything else, we wouldn't think much of it. But it is possible that someone is just that bad at something and they're never going to get better no matter what they do or what they train. It's surprising that it could happen in someone who has managed to become that successful and that dominant and that skilled in another very close, kind of skill set. So manipulating your body to do judo moves and jiu-jitsu moves and other type of athletic endeavors. It would seem weird that they would be so completely incapable of just being able to absorb this information into their brain. But it is possible. Unlikely, but possible. And something to support this is the fact that in this latest fight, speaking of Edmond's cornering again, is that he was yelling at her, and one of the things that I said about this fight was that her head movement, she looked like she'd never even heard of it. He was just screaming. If you listen to the tape where they focus in on where he's mic'd up for his corner, he's just screaming at her head movement, like basically the entire time, in a way that makes me think that this is something that he's exhausted and frustrated trying to get her to do, and she just refuses to do it. And the fact that she has had so little improvement in her striking over that whole time. Even if he was a shitty coach, not the best coach, you would think that someone just by doing it that much he obviously knows she's supposed to move her head. So even him just telling someone that much, if he's doing it every training session, you would think that they would somewhat improve. And we haven't seen that. So maybe it is her. Another evidence that it might be her mindset, and maybe that she does fairly decently in some training and then maybe falls apart or just blanks out or does weird in the fight, is there was footage of her training with Gegard Mousasi, just doing an exhibition grappling match at a gym, you know, nothing crazy, not a competition. They're just doing some grappling with people watching, someone is filming it. And this guy's, you know, he fights at 205, so he probably weighs around 225 to 240 when he's out of competition. She fights at 135 and she's a female, so even though she might be walking around at 160 out of competition, it's someone who has like an probably close to 80-pound weight advantage and is incredibly skillful and is a man, and so he's not having a hard time controlling the position and everything. But she's incredibly frustrated, getting angry, and I'm like, what is with this mindset? Like, she should be so used to this in training. So either she's not allowing herself to be put in positions where she's tested in training, or her mindset is just so flawed that it affects her that badly, and that's a possibility. Now, like I said, I tend to think it's most likely a combination of the two. I think if we saw her go to something like Greg Jackson's camp, who's known for master game planning, figure out exactly what people's strengths and weaknesses are, incredibly realistic and pragmatic with his approaches, and she still didn't improve, then we could say for sure that it was just her. Whereas I do think we have seen signs of Edmond having poor coaching on the show, in the mic'd up corners for a Holly Holm fight, and the people like Travis Brown having a sort of declining career, almost at the height of his successes immediately after switching to his camp. That can't all be a coincidence, has to be related. But we definitely know there's something wrong with Ronda Rousey's mindset. It's not the normal mindset of a fighter, and that definitely affects her. And we've seen that with the way she reacted to her loss. And this is from someone who has lost before, not in mixed martial arts, but she had lost in judo. She got a bronze medal, and you better believe that wasn't the first 2 matches that she lost. And but you also have to understand, this is someone who was brought up in such a way and trained in such a way by her mom that a lot of people would consider child abuse. Not, you know, brutal physical abuse, but mental or emotional abuse. It was incredibly, her mom was a very intense, to put it lightly, person who would train her by lying to her about the rules. She actually lied to Ronda Rousey about what the rule set was to make her behave in a certain way. And she would jump on her in the middle of the night and get her to defend when she was in bed, just to get her to get used to defending an arm bar from being completely surprised. She forced her to train with minor to moderate injuries just so she would learn how to fight through it and things like that. So this was not a normal training environment for a young woman, young person, or even an adult. So that had to affect her mindset, and probably didn't give her the healthiest kind of way to deal with competition in general. Made her a machine in the certain aspects that she did eventually get good at, but that doesn't mean that she would be able to master any given, you know, martial arts skill set, that she would have the correct mindset to deal with the ups and downs of such a dynamic, dramatic sport, and physically and emotionally stressful sport. So it's really hard to tell. I think the only way to truly test it would be to put her in a different team and see what the results were. If we saw her striking get markedly better under Team Alpha Male, who has volunteered to train her, or under someone like Greg Jackson, who's known for just having an incredibly realistic, pragmatic, kind of like just game theory based approach to fighting, who really has awesome game plans, many coaches, things like that. Because the argument that I've always made is that, yeah, Tarverdyan might suck, he might be terrible, but none of these camps only have one person doing the coaching. There's always multiple people. So it seems insane to me that she might not have optimized her skill set under someone who's a subpar coach, but we should have seen some sort of improvement over the last few years, and that's not really what we've seen. We've seen her fight in the exact same style for years. The only time it changed is when she managed to get a couple wins by strikes against Alexis Davis and Sarah McMahon, who it wasn't because of good technique. It was just happened to be that despite her poor technique, Ronda is a very athletic, very strong person. So when she did land a few strikes, they were damaging. But she wasn't throwing those punches well. She wasn't using good striking technique. The punches themselves just happened to be effective because she's very strong and fast and for a woman. So that's what I think about the situation. I think that she may just be kind of stunted in her ability to absorb this type of training at this point in her life and career, and maybe just her mind is not that good at getting better at striking. That would happen with a lot of people. The only reason we don't think anything of it is because those people go to a few classes and then they quit because they're not good at anything else either and they're tired of sucking. But with her, we have someone who, for whatever reason, managed to become elite at certain areas and has become incredibly successful based on that. And then she might just be that bad. I think it's a combination like I was mentioning. But let me know what you guys think, and if you think she's going to come back at all. And if she does, if she'll switch camps. Let me know what you think. Talk to you guys later.